the NFL world and really the sports world still attempting to process the tragic death of 24-year-old Dwayne Haskins Saturday morning in South Florida. Of course, crossing a highway when he was hit by a dump truck. The investigation is ongoing. He was down in South Florida working out with his Steelers teammates. The day before, he was posting fun videos with Najee Harris on Instagram. It just goes to show you just how precious and how fleeting life can be. Charles Robinson, it's good to see you, brother. I was just telling Michael, the thing that I didn't realize, and maybe part of it is because, Dwayne wasn't starting and he had become a backup in Pittsburgh, so I didn't really pay much attention to him. But I didn't realize how beloved he was. I didn't realize how many people he had touched in his short time in the league, in his 24 years in his life, how many people just absolutely loved him. And that was the most beautiful thing. And otherwise, awful, tragic, terrible, and in some cases, ugly weekend. It was really beautiful to see the outpouring and the specifics, the substance of the outpouring. Not just rest in peace, not just this is awful, but like people were genuinely devastated by the loss of their friend and their teammate and their brother.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate that the NFL and sports in general has such a reductive quality to it that the first vantage is always through a box score. Sometimes it takes something like this, which is absolutely awful, for a wide swath of fans or just people in general to know who a person was, rather than what their statistical output was, their success or failure that gets, pinned on them based on their experience in a league or with a team. So I remember one conversation that I'd had with someone in the league. It was after he had taken the selfie with a fan when he was in Washington. And I think I had been pretty critical.
First start?
Yeah,
when he won.
Really early on.
Yeah. I remember.
And I was really critical about it. I remember. I don't know if I'd said something on the radio or podcast or whatever, but I just remember someone in the league reached out to me, and they're like, I can understand. I think I kind of, the way I had framed it from my seeing it was, it looked like someone whose head wasn't in the moment, or they weren't. It's not something that typically you see and you question, like, how serious is this person taking this? And I remember this guy said to me, he's like, there's an airiness to that kid, that when you meet him, he's having fun. Like, he really is out there having fun. And although that might not have been the exact way to maybe show it in that moment, you have to understand it's not about selfishness. It's not about, his age demographic, and this is how, kids are nowadays or whatever. He was just like, he really is a guy that has a lot of fun, and he interacts with a lot of people around him sort of through that demeanor. And that stuck with me a little bit. And I saw you guys reference Stephen Holder's tweet. I've fallen into that trap. Okay. And from a football aspect, our podcast, when Trez Paler, may he rest in peace, was with us, we had some debates about Dwayne, and I was critical of some of the things that were going on with him as a football player. But I will tell you this. I met Ryan Leaf a couple of years ago at the Super Bowl, right? And had a chance to sit down with him, and we had him on, and I walked away.
Blown away, right?
Blown away.
Yeah.
Floored.
Yeah.
And I'm ashamed. I was so ashamed of how many times I had said Ryan Leaf the bust, just focused everything through every time he fell, and I thought, in that moment, like, I gotta recalculate what I'm doing here and remember that there's the human, and then there's the football player, and you have to make sure that you don't let one necessarily interfere with the other. And like I said, it's too reductive sometimes, the way that we look at sports and the people inside it. And I'm not perfect, certainly, in that aspect either.
Yeah, well, I think everybody in this conversation right now has had a moment or two or 10 where we've done exactly what you've done. But the question is, Charles, how do we do it? How do we do it? How do we change that conversation? Is there one thing that jumps out at you and says and you say to yourself, okay, I got to stop doing that thing because this is exactly what the problem is.
Erase the word bust, okay? Like, let's stop using that word. And I've used it, okay, quite a bit. And I think that it's such a catch-all word for failure that it sweeps up the elements of someone as a human too. You know, it when you say bust, it just, I'm sorry, like that word is so powerful. And again, I will bet you that I have slipped on this and used it probably in the last 6 months, you know, maybe the last year or whatever. And I always regret it later because I have figured out that word it's a pretty hurtful word in sports, especially for the individual who gets tagged with it. Right. And it also becomes definitive far too quickly in someone's career. Okay. There's an elasticity in sports that we ignore a lot, particularly when someone fails early on in their career. One of the things that I thought about Dwayne Haskins, I was like, man, you know what? He was down in Florida working. He was with his teammates. He was trying to become a better football player. Like, he was all these things that people were banging on him about, prior to his death. Like, he was putting work in, okay? And at a time in the off season when he didn't have to. And, I think he was so young, just about to turn 25. That's a lot of time for a guy to affect change in his career. Okay. But again, that's the football conversation. It's more just trying to remind yourself over and over, these are human beings we're talking about. And when I get critical, I try to remind myself, say from a football perspective, say his football, is what you just make sure you focus it in on. I'm talking about this person as a football player, not as a person. Right. And it's okay to be critical of someone in one arena, as long as you're saying, you're making sure I am not saying he's a bad guy because he threw 4 picks today. Okay. Like, he played a bad game so it's a tricky, especially in our business where everything is blasted out.
Well, my rule of thumb was always to remind myself and imagine that on the other side of that red light, on the other side of that camera, is somebody's family. Yeah. Or somebody's loved ones watching, or even that individual. And Michael have had a lot of conversations lately around the age-old philosophy of don't start none, won't be none. And this goes back to all 3 of us are old school. So when I became a talking head, and hell, I learned this from Michael. Among the primary people I learned this from, we were at the Boston Globe. Is like, when you write something, you got to show up the next day. Mm-hmm. You gotta be in the locker room the next day, even if you ain't working. If you wrote something critical, you got to show up. Yeah. And I think what's happened more and more in the age of the internet and social media is so many people can be disconnected from the people that they're talking about, and therefore just say whatever they want without any kind of accountability, personal accountability. So both from just a personal place, just the type of person that I want to be, but also in terms of doing my job, I always wanted to remember that I'm talking about somebody that I may have to see in person. Would I say this to their face? Or would I be comfortable with their family hearing me say this about them? Or is this how I would want to be talked about? As somebody who has been in the crosshairs before, how did it feel when somebody was talking about me in a way that was not reflective of who I really was, or that they didn't know what they were talking about? And fortunately and unfortunately, I got to experience that early in my life and my career. So, and again, I haven't batted 1,000 with that. I mean, I'm sure there are times when we've had conversations where, about people and issues, or maybe it has gone too far. But I tell you what, and I had to make peace with this, guys. And again, I credit, hell, I'll just keep pouring it on. It might, not to lay it on thick, Michael, but I'll credit you as a mentor and as somebody that I emulated at a young age. Is that I think, Michael, it isn't to pat you or me on the back. I'm expressing how I wish more of us did it. And Charles, you do it the same way, which is, dare I say it, the right way. I think, Michael, you, as celebrated as you were as a columnist, I think you might have been even bigger, dare I say, if you would have gone the route of some other columnist, if you would not have approached your job with the integrity that you did. Same with you, Charles. You and I have talked about it. There's nobody better as an NFL insider that I know, and I've known you for 20 years. There are certain decisions that you don't make that may have held you back, quote unquote, in this day and age. That if you'd have sold out, maybe you'd have been bigger than you already are. Likewise, I know some of my takes may be lukewarm, quote unquote, or my opinions may not cut through, or my commentary may not be as celebrated as some other people who don't approach their job with the same level of integrity that I try to and that you guys try to. And I'm okay with that, because I can look myself in the mirror and I can go to bed at night not feeling like I took cheap shots at people, or not feeling like, I crossed the line or crossed the boundary or said some things about people that if they got played back, that would make me cringe. Again, I probably, if somebody wanted to, probably dig up some commentary from me that would not make me feel good looking back at it. I'm saying that's how I've tried to approach it. To answer your original question, Michael, like, how can we be better? I try to just remember, like, again, do unto others. Just there's nothing wrong with practicing the golden rule. And if that doesn't get us paid, if that doesn't make me famous, if that doesn't get me trending, I can live with that.
By the way,
good. That was great answers.
Part of how you will be better too is not hiding the fact that you are fallible and made mistakes. Okay. Like the fact that you said things that made you cringe, the fact that I guarantee you go back and look up, particularly stuff I probably wrote in my 20s. I look back at myself as a journalist in my 20s and I wish I could go back and talk to myself, and be like, listen, man, just pull it back. Like you don't have, but that's the thing. Right. You gotta be able to say to people though, I did make that mistake. And there's, the most powerful thing is someone embracing the fact that they're flawed and this is what they've learned and trying to impart it on people that like this has been a journey for me. See, and by the way, treating people we cover like that too.
That's why it's so good, Charles. And you said, some of the mistakes you made, you were in your 20s. And some of them were in the 30s. Okay. But
many in my 20s.
40s.
Yeah. But
40s.
But here's the great thing.
Right.
But here's the great thing. This is how we bring it all the way back. Because Dwayne Haskins was 24.
Yep.
He was 24. So anything you have to say about Dwayne Haskins, whether it was, oh, look at this guy, he's not taking the job seriously enough, or this kid doesn't get it, remember the age. And I think that's one thing I always have to keep in mind. Remember that. Now, some people are just incredible at 21 or 22. I wasn't one of those people at 21 or 22 years old, and very few people are. And even if they are incredible at 22, they're going to be more incredible at 32. So just treat them, meet them where they are, and treat them with a little bit of grace when you're talking, especially when you're talking about issues of maturity and they didn't do it, they could have handled that better. Yeah, we could all handle things better, especially when you're talking about your early 20s and making some money for the first time.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's absolutely right. It's unfortunate that we work in the business that we do, where it's so many things are treated as so black and white. And we all know that as we get older, the world is such a gray place. And we just need to accept that and process the gray instead of just being like, it's this way or that way and nothing else,
Well, listen, Michael, unless you have something pressing, I feel like that's the best use of Charles's time.
That's the lesson.
Reflect on Dwayne Haskins. Reflect on how we do our job, how we can be better, what a lesson that we could take away from this tragedy. And Charles, we'll just catch up with you later this week, man. And we'll get you. We'll let you. You emptied your heart to us. You emptied your soul to us. We'll let you empty your notebook later this week, unless you got something that you just got to get off right quick.
No. Just one other thing I would say before we get out of this. I got beat up a little bit on Twitter about this. About, hey, don't,
what's that?
In particular with Gil Brandt, I was like, hey, don't keep sharing the audio and this and that. And people were like, this needs to be exposed. This needs to be put out there. I would just say to people, okay, his family, this was a young man who was on the mountaintop, okay? And to lose a child is hard enough, but to lose a child who worked to get to the mountaintop and then at this stage of his life, that family, those comments are out there. People are going to see them. They can see them if they want to. We're a day, 2, 3 days, as we get removed from this, they don't need to keep hearing some of those words. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like it's just, think of them, okay? And I know it does need to be out there, but there was a loss that was suffered here. And for the vast majority of it, it was not our loss, not in the way it was their loss. And we need to remember that. So,
well, no, well said, man. No, we started off, we didn't want to give much oxygen to the sidebar.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because you know, let's remember the man. Let's celebrate his life. Let's mourn for him and send our condolences to the family, and not let other people's lack of tact, for lack of a better phrase, you know, dominate the conversation. But it did give rise to an important conversation on how we cannot make the same mistakes in life, not just in death, but in life, when it comes to defining not just players, man, but people by what they do and what they have. Here's a guy that made it to the league, but most important, he made an impact on the people that he was around in the locker room. They loved him. I wish I'd have gotten to know him, because he sounded like a great guy. Rest in peace, Dwayne Haskins.
Hey, thanks for watching Brother from Another on YouTube. Make sure you hit subscribe before you leave, and be sure to watch us 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern Time on Peacock. Appreciate you.